on his way from the Parks Committee meeting. So if we just want to.
You ready?
It's up and running.
Okay, no, we'll get rolling. Welcome to tonight's special joint council and safe bicycle and pedestrian transport committee. This is the special council meeting, which means we're only allowed to discuss the topic that's on the agenda. For example, we couldn't talk about the building code. Thank you for giving your time up to attend this evening. Everyone's going to have an opportunity to speak. The procedures are on the back of the agenda. I think we've all been through this once before. We ask you to stand, say your name and address, speak for 3 minutes. We'll give you a notice that you have 2 minutes left. And then when you're finished, please be seated. As the fiscal officer conducts the roll, if you haven't signed in, please sign in the sign-in sheet. Here behind the corner, we have copies of the survey that was conducted from November to February, comments from the survey responders, a map of the village similar to the one which is right in front of us, and a very tentative timeline of what we've done so far, and what needs to be done in the short and long term to complete the project. My goal tonight is to have council pass a motion to accept the master plan presented by Verdantis Engineering. Accepting the plan would acknowledge what has been presented to council. It does not in any way obligate council, Verdantis, or the committee to any action. The motion simply recognizes the project presented to council for consideration of implementation. This is what we paid $15,000 for. Now, we've worked with Verdantis for over 20 years. The Verdantis master plan for the park was approved a few years ago. It contained many great ideas to maintain and improve our park. And Verdantis does a fine job. And Rich, I think you, more than any, thinking inside the box and outside the box and make the best we can. So at this time, we'll do a roll call.
Berger.
Here.
Canton.
Here.
Kavanaugh. Here. Sawicki.
Here.
Porter.
Here.
Bell.
Here.
Our first speaker is Carrie Schloss, co-chairman of the committee. Carrie is going to present the committee's phase 1 stage of the project cost estimate, followed by a discussion of her comments. Okay, Carrie, the floor is yours. Please stand and do the usual name and address.
Okay, Carrie Schloss, 290 Hickory Hill Road. I've got some visuals to share. So I'll be projecting some things on there. I wanted to first just catch you all up because we've offered some updates along the way, but just progress of our committee to date. So starting with in 2023, the village received a grant for $800,000 from NOACA. It's an 80-20 match grant, but they will pay up to $800,000 as the match for pedestrian and bike trail implementation, and the implementation should be in their fiscal year 26. In 2024, through a motion and council approval, the ad hoc committee for safe bicycle and pedestrian transport was formed in October 2024. And our goal was to evaluate the plan for safe bicycle and pedestrian transport through community engagement, safety education, and infrastructure improvements. And that was what was approved by council for us to do. We said that our duties were to develop a safe bicycle and pedestrian access plan, engaging and learning from the community about bicycle and pedestrian safety needs, and making recommendations to the village council on the selection of bicycle and pedestrian projects to be submitted for state and federal funding opportunities, among a couple other duties. But I'm just sharing those because that is kind of what we've done to date. So then the survey went out. You all had an opportunity to provide feedback on the survey questions and approved our use of the survey and putting the survey out to the community. It was out from November 24th through February 2025. We received 373 respondents. These are household responses, so we asked for one response per household. 373 we figured is about 25% of the households in South Russell. And then after the survey and in response to what came out of the survey, we came up with a recommendation for a phased action plan, which we shared in March of 2025. And then council approved $15,000 for Verdantis to develop a master trails plan. And where we're at right now is Verdantis has been working on the master plan, also a very detailed design for phase 1, which is something that we'll share today, and a cost estimate. So what I wanted to share was just a reminder of some of the highlights that came out of the survey of 373 responses. So part of our goal with the survey was to use the information to provide information to council and the mayor on the desire of residents to walk, bike, run, any kind of active transport in South Russell, identify safety barriers to doing so, and identify support or opposition to different types of projects in different locations. And then we said we would use the results to inform a phased action plan. So these are the 3 questions we sought to answer with the survey. What is the desire of the community to walk or bike in South Russell? What improvements would cause residents to walk or bike more often? And what is the support or opposition for different improvements in different locations? So the key insights for the first one is that the first question about the desire of residents to do this, to walk, bike, and that's kind of a substitute for all modes of active transportation. 91% of households walk or bike in South Russell daily, very frequently, often, or sometimes. Most pedestrian bicycle transport, when we asked where people were wanting to go to and from, was to South Russell Village Park. Next was to Sugar Falls, and then if we broke it down by age groups, for children under 18, it was to Sugar Falls School. We didn't separate them out, Gurney, intermediate school, middle school, high school, but those schools were where the children under 18 were wanting to walk and bike to. Which improvements, so this is the second question, which improvements would cause members of your household to walk or bike more often in South Russell? This is just an example of the options that we gave. There was less traffic, car speed was lower, there were off-road paths, intersections and crossings were safer, there was better lighting or other, or none of the above. And the pattern looked like this for almost every single segment. The number 1 improvement was off-road paths. That's what people wanted. The next most frequent cited improvement that people were wanting in order to walk or bike more often in South Russell was safer intersections and crossings, with crosswalks and signals. So I'm just sharing that was one for specifically for South Russell, but the pattern of that was the same for all of them. So we found key insights for the off-road paths are the number 1 infrastructure improvement to allow the community to walk, bike more often to all destinations. Safer intersections and crossings are the second most cited improvement. And off-road paths and safer intersections and crossings to South Russell Village Park would allow the most community members to walk, bike more often. It had the highest bar for off-road paths. The last one is what is the support or opposition for different improvements in different locations? You can see all these colored segments, A, B, C, D, and then the little purple stripe on Washington are all the little symbols or crossings. We asked about each and every one of those individual colored segments. What we found was that there was broad support from the households that responded for all of these improvements, but you can see that improvements, there was more support, very supportive or supportive, for the segments that were moving west. And specifically, if you look at the 2 segments, the Gurney to South Russell Park and South Russell Park to Sugar Falls, those were the 2 highest support. And so part of that informed what we're proposing as phase 1. So we saw significant support for all these segments, highest for off-road paths, support increases in the western segments, and the desire to connect to South Russell Park. We also found that 60 households who were would move from neutral or opposed to supportive if it was funded by grants. So for them, the only reason they had opposition or unsupportive was because of potential funding. So we do want to share what the residents' concerns are, so just a reminder of what they were. There were 3 main concerns that all of the concerns fell into in like that open section where we just asked, what are you worried about? One was maintaining the rural character of the community, another one was cost, and others felt like because Bell Road was already widened in this segment, that was actually already sufficient. So we did find a small town and rural design guide for paths and bike and pedestrian infrastructure, which we have shared with Verdantis. We do have a grant that will cover $800,000 of these trails and improvements to help address that concern of cost. And we did find research showing that actually the widening is not sufficient for improving safety of pedestrians and bikers because it does encourage higher car speeds and it also higher speeds reduce peripheral vision. So we are finding that it isn't necessarily sufficient to address the safety concerns of the residents. We also heard a lot of really strong enthusiasm in these open comments. People were saying that it would be life-changing. These are just a couple voices from the community that you can see here. That it's a no-brainer, that they strongly support this, they live on Bell. People are saying, we've really heard a lot of strong support in these comments, and I think the comments are shared back there so you can read all of them. The majority of the comments are in support. We also shared the negative ones and then the neutral ones that kind of were maybe not even about paths at all. It gave people an opportunity to share what they were thinking. So the insights and recommendations that we shared in March were that improved infrastructure of bicycle and pedestrian transport is highly desired in this community. That was an open question last October when our committee formed. We also, our recommendation is to prioritize connecting residents to South Russell parks and children to schools, and as much as possible to fund all of this infrastructure with grants, and to make sure that we keep the rural character of the community through path design and take a phased and actionable approach. So this is our phase 1 recommendation. This is kind of a bubble drawing just because I think when we see the more detailed maps, sometimes it's hard to see exactly where we're talking about. The pink segments show, and the blue dots are all crossings, and the pink segments are what we're proposing as the initial recommendation for phase 1. That additional purple segment is an expanded segment, which in our last committee meeting, we decided, the committee recommended, let's get the most we can for the grant money that we have. And so we asked to cost that out. And so I'll share what the two costs are. But basically, phase 1 recommendation, starting from left to right, west to east, is from Spring Drive, which is Countryside Estates, crossing to South Russell Village Park, through South Russell Village Park, the crossing that already exists at Alderwood, crossing back to the north side of Bell, moving up Bell to Gurney, a crossing at Gurney, which would connect Sugarbush, and then an off-road path boardwalk to Sugar Lakes, bringing that whole Sugar Lakes community into this trail, and that would be a boardwalk, and then that is the pink segment. That pink segment is less than 1 mile of path. We calculated that it would connect more than 50% of the residents if you include all those community side streets to the park, to Gurney, and to each other. If we extend it to that purple segment, then we get to 306. The crossing at 306 is a part of our phase 1 recommendation, whether or not we get that expanded segment. So many people are telling us that they see people running across to get to, kids running across to get to the gas station, people running across to get to the businesses or the farmer's market, and bikers who can't trigger the light to change for them and have to just cross 45-mile-per-hour traffic if no car comes to trigger the light. So we are recommending a crossing at 306, even if we don't get that segment that connects us to 306, so signal crossing there. So the two different costs for these, and I will turn this over in a second to Rich to share the specifics of the costs, but I just wanted to share that for that initial phase, those that are in pink with the blue crossings, the cost is $745,851 total. So an 80% would be covered by the Milwaukee grant with a 20% match for the village. If we did the expanded phase 1, it would be $1,150,000 $23,384. So that would kind of max out our $800,000 grant from
What was
NWAPA.
that number again, total?
$1,023,384. So, that was addressing that, recommendation from our committee where, we kind of went through the segments and everyone said, you know, we actually want to try and get the most that we can for the grant money that we have in hand right now. And so that would be the segment that we want to add to it if we want to kind of do that whole piece. So next, I will turn it over to Rich to walk through the details of phase one, and I can project the maps on here for you.
Good.
And walk through what is coming up in those cost estimates, because they did a great job of like, what part is for materials, what part is for design, what part is like contingency in case things cost more than they expected, which is built into the cost estimate. But today, we are hoping as a committee, we would love to have this work move forward this fall. We're hearing that it's desired from the community. And we want to know from you, what are barriers, you know, for you? What are concerns that you have now, so we can start to think about them, address them, and answer your questions over the next couple of weeks. So we want to hear your questions, we want to hear your ideas, any concerns you have. We'd love to hear feedback. We'd love to get agreement on phase one segments, and what they should be. So what are we moving forward with, and in order to prepare to move this work forward in the fall.
Okay, thank you. It's a lot of work. I appreciate what you've done so far. Rich, what do you need on the project? What would you like to establish a project?
We want to start with the site plan.
Sorry, one second.
So as we started looking at the path, the first thing we sort of asked each other and thought about the community was what's the size of the path? We needed to know NOACA's design criteria for the path. Are they going to require an 11-foot multimodal path that has a stripe down the middle, or are we allowed to make it a narrower path? And so we had some conversation with NOACA, and then they deferred to ODOT, and the grant doesn't specify that it has to be a multimodal trail. And ODOT's recommendation was a minimum of 5-foot width. We did ask material-wise, they were not really, didn't seem comfortable with the gravel path, and we were not really comfortable with that either because it is going to require more maintenance. Obviously, over time, if it's 5 foot, it's not going to take very long for that to narrow in without, maintenance. And depending on where it is, you may have some erosion that could be caused by the washouts or just big rainstorms that can take out the gravel. So the thought was to do, look at an asphalt surface for this path that would be flexible, could be routed. We're not probably going to have a dead straight path like the road, like Bell Road. We're going to need to vary in and out. There's telephone poles, there's driveways, there's mailboxes, a number of obstacles that we can, we'll need to work around. We want to preserve the existing infrastructure that's there. There are a lot of catch basins that are in the ditches along there, so we want to work around those. We do have a couple of places where there's a culvert crossing, so we will need boardwalk in that area to cross those. And that way we're not just filling the area, we're not causing excessive cost by extending the culvert as well. So if we can, it sounded like through talking with the Jaga road department that would be feasible. We would have a trail, a boardwalk that's similar in width to the trail itself, and we would, there's different methods, but it probably be a wood structure. Could be a wood combination metal, but maybe even like a track surfacing for longevity. And then we looked at location and based on the neighborhoods, what side of the street. We decided it would be, preference would be on one side. It doesn't need to be on both sides of the street. Where would people be coming from? What majority of the neighborhoods, where kind of the biggest population would be. We wanted to look at how it tied in with Gurney School and how we tied in with existing crosswalk as well down at South Russell Park. And we could also take advantage of the frontage in South Russell Park to be able to run along there with a path that actually could be later expanded within the park to create a loop trail. So part of that could be, sort of phase one, and then down the road could be an expansion within the park itself. There is a conservation easement on part of that, but we did talk to the Western Reserve, right?
Yes.
And they said we were allowed to put a path through that area of the park, so that was covered as well. So this kind of covers just the path on Bell Road. You can see on the map we have red lines as well that are, some of those are kind of a route that would follow an existing road, and then some we have. You can see the high tension wires that we were proposing a future path along there that could be part of a long-term regional trail connection. Would connect into, maybe that would end up in Solon, could end up north and connect into some of the Jaga Park District areas. That's probably something that's obviously something that would need to be coordinated with the power company for their approval, and then that would follow a different kind of design standard. We're finding that they're going to want to run bigger vehicles on it, so it's probably going to be more like a road, a shared road, but obviously not with regular traffic, but just when the utility would need to use that or maintain along the power lines.
Rich, has the power company ever given permission for that to happen anyplace?
In speaking with people, yes, but I can't really point to specific examples. It's something that would need, probably wouldn't happen fast, but it would need discussions with the power company, especially since they already do have a path. It seems kind of that they would almost welcome it because you would have to create more of a roadway for them to use for maintenance. But again,
I'm thinking of.
I don't have any personal experience with doing that.
Yeah, the pushback with the kids that used to try to take their four-wheelers out there. There were barricades and all kinds of things.
Yeah. That probably was true with a lot of like the Metro Park trails that go through, kind of follow railways. That could be something, but I think if it's more well used, more eyes on it, maybe less likely to happen if it's a paved trail or a cinders trail. It's not really like an off-road trail, like you might see the four-wheelers would like to do, but it would have to be vehicle controlled and somehow monitored for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon, but then again, when you think about all the rural trails out there, that it probably does occur in places, but with the number of people that are using these trails, I think it would really probably prohibit a lot of that from happening, or would be reported as well. And also we have the Washington Street connecting into Sugar Falls there. They've been asking about the progress of the trail master plan here, and they're very interested in having connections as well into Sugar Falls, and they obviously have connection then that goes to Solon. So they're looking regionally as well for the trail systems. And then the other trail would be from 306 going east. We sort of looked at a first segment going kind of to the first major road to the east, and we didn't get any further. We didn't look at any cost, but the blue and the red are really just looking at potential trails down the road that could be investigated and see how they could connect into the overall like local and then regional trail system. I guess we could go to the next flow So then that, again, you can see some blue trails, and these are just people's ideas of, it'd be a great place to have a trail here. It's an open area, or it's flat level area, it's back of lots, it's just potential areas for trails. That's kind of what we were looking at initially. So then on phase one, and if you can follow this, the way the maps are, we sort of started down by Spring and the top one, and then they just match to the next. So you can go from the top to the bottom of the sheet. They connect into each other. And so you can see where we start there at Spring. Then we have the red line, so those are potential on-road trail going to the north through the development that would get you into Sugar Falls. The thought is that that's not as busy a road, that people could come off of the path and then head up towards Chagrin that way, sort of roundabout, rather than continuing down Bell. That section from Spring to Chagrin there are a lot of obstacles in there, a lot of grade change, there's a lot of landscaping, so that would be a little bit more of a challenge in that area. Not that it couldn't be done, but it'd be more disruptive to continue that. So we're kind of picking the easier route, but when we start for Spring and then start heading east, you can see there's a crosswalk sort of at the west end of the park. We would have a similar crossing, the Beacon crossing there, that would get people into the park. So that's one access point right to the park itself. And then we have the trail that goes through the park by the shelter, and then it would cross then back over, along the parking lot, front of the parking lot, and then would cross back over the existing crosswalk. And from there, we could follow right away to the east. And then as we get about where the cursor is, a little bit past that is where we would probably need a boardwalk. There's a stream crossing in that section there. There's some existing wetlands in there. If we put a boardwalk in there, there's different methods of putting pilings in that aren't going to disrupt the wetlands, wouldn't require wetland fill permits. It still would require some oversight by the Army Corps, but that would be a way of really preserving the area and not having to extend the culvert out into that wetland area as well, which would require a fair amount of fill. Actually, that's where the power line crossing is as well, so it could potentially tie in there in the future. And we will continue along the north side of Bell along there. This next section would be a little trickier. It is wooded along the right of way, and does have it, but it is kind of a ridge. So we may, in that area, we may need some construction easements. So during construction it may require grading beyond the right of way. And that may happen in a number of areas along there. That's something we would need to determine once we get the final topography and know exactly what we're working with in terms of grading. But the idea is just to head east along there, kind of along that ridge line. And then for the most part, it would really go along the front yards. The idea is to keep it right at the edge of the right of way. The power poles are about at the edge of the right of way. The right of way does vary. So everybody's property, some step in, some step out. So that's again another item that needs to be coordinated with the final layout. I would not envision a straight trail that we could, if we need to veer, keep it to the north and then veer down around a pole. I wouldn't object to that. It kind of gives a little bit of a break in the trail as well. Maybe keep people riding slower if they have a little bit of wiggle in the trail. And again, keep going over, and then we would hit Gurney School. We would have a painted crosswalk across their driveway, and then we would have a beacon crossing to the south. There are some guardrails that we would need to adjust and get around, but again, there's where we would need boardwalk on the south side to cross there. It is pretty tight. We would probably stay real tight to the guardrail. in that area. And then you can see the blue line where it could connect into a future trail going to the south into the lakes neighborhood as well.
So, Rich, your design services, you mentioned you don't have the topography and the specific areas. It seems like this is a 500-foot elevation view of where the planned path is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but, do we have anything which will say, well, we can use the right-of-way here, we're gonna have to acquire property here? And the reason, that I asked the question is, it appears like, in both your proposals, in the first proposal that we've been focused on with the $745,000, there is not even a TBD line item which talks about right-of-way acquisition, construction, and slope easements. The second proposal that you have, which is the over the $1 million proposal, has all that TBD. And in my view, there might be significant costs with obtaining those easements and or acquiring that property if the village has to acquire it. So, in your estimation from similar projects, do we have any idea what those additional costs might be?
I do not have an idea what those, because it would really, again, vary. The idea is to stay in the right of way as much as possible.
Yeah, and I understand that, and that's a great idea. My concern is, in some areas, I don't know if we've looked at a detailed plan of how much room the right-of-way provides, but it seems, just in gross order of magnitude, a lot of times we'll be over in the ditch. So, it'd be nice to, one thing that I saw in Pepper Pike, and they've gone through all these sidewalk proposals, right now they have it staked.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the path that this sidewalk and or path is going to take. I hear a lot about, well, it'll go here, and well, we might have to worry about, going through people's yards here or regrading their yards. But I look at that and say, that doesn't appear to capture the actual costs and where this path is going to be. So, one of the things that, I was thinking of, is there a way to put down spray paint that says, here's where it's going to go, and it's going to zig into a yard here. These are the property owners that will have to get buy-in from, or, go the eminent domain route or whatever. But it seems like we don't have those details here in these plans and these estimated costs.
Right, and I would envision this would be staked out to get, obviously, the next step would be to look at it really in more detail. But what I used for the base map, which had the power poles and the storm system, is what the improvement plans when Bell Road was widened. So it did have all the aprons and has the catch basins and the poles on it. It is county topography, so it's 2-foot contours. So that's why you don't get the level of detail where the ditches are. You can see where they are, but not finite, where they're sloped. So that's why we talk about, if we need easements or anything along that line.
Because we also may have to enclose some of those ditches, I would imagine.
There potentially could be some. It seems like we probably don't need to, but again, it's a long, even though it's not a mile, that's still a lot of area to cover, and it's not like Pepper Pike, theirs is already kind of closed in, and then for the most part, they're going to yards, grass areas.
Where's the
pretty
Pepper
easy.
Pike one that we're talking about? What road?
Along South Woodland, and then it starts kind of Pine Tree. Right there, actually, they've just started the next segment, so with Pine Tree down to Lander, and then goes north on Lander.
So it's a work in progress.
Yeah, they've done the Lander north, and then they're working on the next section, going.
But to your point, most of that's going through people's yards.
Right.
Not considering a right-of-way or anything else like
I
that.
don't know, yeah, so that's what I was trying to tell, I didn't see any stakes, at least driving by as to where the right of way was, I just saw where the path was marked out.
And I believe there was a lot of controversy that had to be brought to a vote before the populace as well on that project. I could be wrong on that one.
I believe they voted on it, I don't recall, although I have heard that they now that they had the one segment and people were, oh yeah, this is great. So we want more. And actually I passed 3 people who were walking in the grass on that side next to it. Well, it's under construction, so it looked like they were people eager to have that path. But it is on one side again of the road, so it's not a double sided. And that looks like it's a 6-foot. It's not a multimodal 10-foot path.
And, could we get something in writing? I mean, you've had a conversation about the width, but it'd be awful nice to get something in writing from the governing body, whether it's ODOT, NOACA, the Ohio Revised Code, or whatever, that says you're okay with this width of a path. Because I'd hate to go forward in the project to find out that, you can't get any grants because you didn't follow the guidelines properly.
Right, and that would be the next step. Actually, that's what NOACA would ask us to do, is to resubmit. Because originally it was submitted for 8-foot wide to NOACA. So they said we would need to resubmit that as a 5-foot path. So that would really be the next step to make sure we get everybody sign off. Because ODOT did say 5 foot is a minimum, but they didn't say, yes, we're good with 5 foot. It would need more confirmation, but that's their interpretation of the grant, was that if you could go down to 5 foot, which is a minimum that they would allow.
Just
and they
to
would be the review
clarify,
agency.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
What's that?
I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
That's right.
If I'm looking at the middle stripe of the road, we have 30 feet, do we not?
Right.
Which seems like a lot, that you could do it within.
It does, but it is a walk. It's for that road. It actually is a narrow right of way. Plus, as the road was widened, the ditch was pushed out. And as we get closer to 306, you have turn lanes, so it gets wider. So in that area, that's why I have the TV, because it would need to push out into the properties there. And as we go to the next step, then we could start determining, some costs on that.
Yeah, because I'm also concerned about the property owners and their buy-in. It's one thing if they're not putting the path through your front yard to be supportive, but sometimes when your front yard is being excavated, you have a different opinion. So I know we've tried to contact those folks, but, it'd be nice to know what we need to do to get their buy-in. Do we need to acquire a right-of-way? Do we need to acquire their property? Do we take it by eminent domain? And that's a question I don't think that's been answered yet in terms of those 6 to 8 houses that will be affected by the proposed pathway.
If I may have the floor, thank you for being here this evening, and I feel your passion for this, and I appreciate your work. I have a few comments and some questions, because I want to be able to make an intelligent decision. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars mitigating stormwater runoff. My concern is a blacktop path, 5 feet plus wide, traveling down Bell. What would be the effect of stormwater runoff? Is that a question at all? Has anybody even thought of it?
Yeah, it's for something like that. Yeah, you're typically not going to be required to prepare a stormwater management, program for that. It depends on the level, the amount of disturbance. If you take, the length of that by, the width and the, how many acres that is, or if it is even an acre of land for disturbance, and as to whether that would be something that meets stormwater management.
Okay. Also, those of us who have a blacktop driveway know that there's maintenance. And wondering about the cost of maintenance after a couple of years. That is a concern. Also, I understand that there'll be at least 3 to 5 crossovers that children, adults will have to cross Bell. Is that true?
We have the one existing and then we're proposing 2 more.
Okay. Now, as a father of 7 children and 11 grandchildren, that would concern me. That definitely would concern me, having 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds crossing Bell at 2 or 3 points. That's a concern. Let's see, the survey, 373 people, households. 25% of our households here in Southwest, is that correct? Okay. Are you confident that the poll was a scientific poll?
So it depends on who responds, right? We did our best to get the word out broadly. We put it in social media, we put it in the newsletter, we hung flyers throughout the community and through the village with QR codes to take the survey. We put paper copies of the survey here. We put flyers in people's mailboxes. Suzanne actually walked up and down Bell, putting a flyer in every mailbox. We had flyers go out in different HOAs. Some of you may have received them in your own mailboxes. And that was volunteer only. So wherever we could get volunteers to put surveys out, or to put information for surveys out, we put information for surveys out. We haven't looked at the spatial bias, if there was any spatial bias, if we responded or not. 25% response rate is pretty good, I think. If you remember, the village put out a survey about a year before, had 8 responses. So I think, moving to 373 was a big improvement. We really put in the effort to really get those responses back and kept it open for several months to continue to try and make more pushes. We did social media again, about 3 weeks before we closed it to say this is your last chance. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends, we emailed our contacts. And so.
Okay. Now, I took the liberty of looking up the characteristics of a scientific poll because I wasn't sure. Random sampling, large sample size, unbiased, neutral questions, high response rate, representative sampling, and transparency. Now, of the 373 households, approximately, did you receive answers from both adults and children?
So we asked one response per household. We asked separate questions. We said, how often do you do these things? How often does your spouse or partner do these things? Like walk, bike, How often do adult children in your household do these things? How often do children under 18 do these things? And so that was about how often people walk or bike, where they're walking or biking to. We asked for individual people. If there were 5 children in the household under 18, we only had 1. We didn't ask for all 5 individually. So, but we did try to separate groups of people. So someone might have been responding that doesn't walk or bike when they walk, respond for them, but maybe their partner goes daily. And so we were able to tease that apart.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
A few questions. Rich, really quickly, in your cost estimates, I don't know that the traffic paint was included for Alderwood and Waverly. We'll have to paint some crossings there as well, since the bikes will be going across. We don't need
Gotcha.
the stanchions.
Understood.
I continue to be confused. I think maybe because I'm influenced by the other council members about the width. Some instances I read that Ohio Revised Code says 5 feet pedestrian only, no bikes. Some I read we have to have 10 feet. I don't know what the right answer is. And I guess that's why I'm going to lean on you for what the right answer might be.
So the ODOT, deferring to ODOT is a 5-foot minimum is for, they call for ADA requirements.
Okay.
That would be the minimum width.
Okay.
Depends on the designation of the trail. If it's a multimodal trail, where you're bikes, runners, everything, It's gonna be 11 feet with a center line for two-way traffic. This is, I guess if you look at like a side street versus Bell Street versus 306, you just have different levels of bike trails. So that's the way ODOT was looking at it, is this would be kind of the minimal trail.
So if we had a 5 foot trail and people rode their bikes on it, are we violating ORC?
I can't answer that. I don't know if that's,
Meaning
if
if
it
they're
specifically
cross,
says.
if they
like-
pass
So
each other?
ORC, in my opinion, is a little antiquated. From what I remember reading about a year ago, saying, hey, you're gonna ticket some kid for riding their bike on the sidewalk because it's only 5 feet.
You're 5 feet. I'm 5'4", so if I let my hands hang down, that's 5 feet right there.
But the issue is the use based on the width. So what I just heard you say is that if it's 5 foot wide, it's pedestrian traffic, no bikes. And, but you may have said it or misstated, but if we're gonna have multi-use for bikes or whatever, then it seems that it has to be larger, wider. So,
And I don't know if
I hope there's a
there's,
loophole.
what's that?
I hope there's a loophole.
And I don't know if there's maybe there's like an age, like if you're under a certain age, but we need to research that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want the public body to go down a path that's gonna cause issues for the residents and future public bodies.
yeah, because if 5 feet is what they agreed to, was it with the understanding that that's for walkers only? But that's why I say we need to define, because I'd hate to go down the path and then find out, so to speak, and then find out, oh, you don't qualify for funding, or you have to restrict. If the anticipation of the community was, we could ride bikes on it, we could have class 1 and 2 e-bikes on it, we could walk, we could use strollers, and then we find out, oh no, you can only have pedestrian traffic on it. That's kind of like selling a pig in a poke to the public as well, so.
I guess my only concern is we want to make sure we get it done right, so everybody can utilize the path, there's no issues in the future. The grant,
Can I,
Yeah.
So, I had an email from Nowaka
okay,
that says the 5 feet wide would be an acceptable project, which was to your question, but it would be a pedestrian-only facility. So it would be follow the design for a pedestrian-only facility.
okay.
However, as we were saying, you see kids in the village riding their bikes on sidewalks that are much narrower. They're still not on the road. So I think the question becomes to you all, right?
Right.
Do we want an 11-foot path? Can we get that through? We were feeling like we were gonna get a lot of pushback to an 11-foot path. So let's get what we can get to get people off the roads and
Right.
get them safe. Because we see people walking dogs, we see people, kids walking, kids on bikes.
No, for sure.
So I think we were proposing this 5-foot path because we felt like it's something we could get done, which would start to get people off the road and safer. But if we think we can do more, I don't want to limit us.
No, I know
So
pragmatism.
Karen, by pedestrian only, that means walking only?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you suggesting that because children use their bikes or other motorized scooters or whatever on sidewalks, that we ought to just close our eye and say, and we'll get a walking path, but it's okay if the kids use it?
I don't actually know what the laws are in Trinidad Falls, but I know in a place that I used to live, kids under 12 were allowed on bikes on sidewalks, because they didn't walk on roads. I don't know what it is
Yeah.
here, and I don't know what it is in South Russell, because we don't have sidewalks here.
And those are questions that like the solicitor might have to address to say, okay, if we have a walking path and somebody gets injured on a bike, what's the liability of the village? So,
And I guess another question is what can we legislatively do for any kind of edits to that, I guess, so to speak, within South Russell?
Right.
I mean, just want to clarify with the grant too, does that have to be used in fiscal 26 or can that be used in 27, 28?
According to Eric, he said that NOACA's, they're good about holding it in 2 or 3 years.
Okay. I only ask that because there's a lot of big expensive projects just in the case we have to delay some things a few years.
Yeah, I believe we were even talking 28 at one point, this may push out.
If you look at go ahead, John.
All I can relate is that after the last council meeting, I spoke with Eric, and he was very encouraging that NOACA likes to see grassroots projects coming from the citizens, and that when it comes to deadlines on funding, they are very lenient. Now, there's no guarantee, but what he's saying is, once the money for the grant is approved, they really try to do what they can to see it through.
Oh, I can understand
Anyway,
that from their perspective.
So you're not writing, but that's.
Did Eric indicate that we'd have to apply now, and then potentially push the project out? Or was that unanswered?
The conversation didn't get that specific, but he did say that if a request for extension was made, he would see it like, again, in his experience, likely that it would be.
This is from Adam Allen, NOACA. Once this project is programmed, ODOT will schedule a scoping call that we should be included on. It will take between 9 to 18 months for it to move through the engineering design process. At this point, the earliest possible award date would be state fiscal year 2028, calendar year 2027, which would come out in June. So we're looking at any construction would start July 1, 2027. This is from NOACA.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And lastly, to Councilman Canton, my unscientific qualitative research from written responses from residents, I'd say 10 to 1 for, 1 against. It's very unscientific.
Well, and to that, I think 25%, just looking at like nursing responses when they do surveys, they don't get 25% back, unless you offer them a stipend. So that 25% is pretty good.
To be specific, it's 27, 393, 1,400 homes. Jerry, you brought up the same thing. We've met with the mayors of Pepper Pike, the mayor of Moreland Hills, the Mayfield Heights, Moreland Hills, Orange, and Spring. Pepper Pike, they did the survey, nobody, oh no, the council said it's slanted, distorted. Council did a survey. Council said then put it on the ballot. Each time, 65% of the Pepper Pike respondents for the first survey, for the council supplied survey, and for the ballot, the vote on the ballot was 65%. We're running here at about 67% off our survey. So I think we've covered it. Back there behind the negative comments, there are 14 negative comments, and 12 of the 14 were don't use South Russell funds. So you're looking at whatever we spend, we're spending eventually 20 cents on the dollar of our money. So
Mayor, that's until the grant runs out.
until the grant, yes.
And if we're talking about the extension all the way from, Spring Drive all the way down to Spring Falls, at this point, the cost of the first project would prevent us from using that money, essentially be gone for the westward extension. So we either have to get another grant, or it comes out of the taxpayers' pockets, or we don't do it. All options, of course. But Chris, if you're done, and Chris, did you want to go?
I have a quick question for Rich, and my question is, does this path have to be ADA compliant?
In terms of the crossings?
In terms of the entire project?
Yeah. There are places, like a regular sidewalk, you're in a city where the slope is greater than, 5%.
Right.
You have existing conditions that kind of abstain you from having to put, ramps and landings and handrails. So that's what that would be. It would follow those guidelines.
So is that a
Okay.
yes, it would have to be?
To the extent it could.
But if it can't, you're allowed to sidestep that?
Well, you have existing conditions, you may have a hillside where you're not going to need, you're not gonna be able to have it below 5% slope. So you would have to have switchbacks and it would just, being a path, I guess we would need to look to make sure, what that criteria would be.
This is Sunil Shah,
Yeah.
Program Transportation Commander, District 12, ODOT. Depending on the funding requirements, it would seem pretty loose. You could possibly do a walking path, not designed for bikes, that would typically have a 5-foot minimum width for ADA.
Yeah, that only addresses the width of the path. It doesn't address the slope of the path in terms of making it ADA compliant for access.
Yeah, the trails have different requirements than going to a building, like an accessible building, from an ADA parking space. So we would look at those requirements for paths.
I just, I'm just wondering if that complicates the process here, and obviously every complication adds cost.
That is something we would look at though.
It's
I just have a few questions. 5 foot, I run along Bell, I see people with strollers with children in them up and down the street. I see people on bikes, kids all over the place going to and from the park, and I'm wondering if 5 feet is enough. And maybe it should be 8 feet beyond the ADA requirement, but because of two-way traffic. And if we had one path on Bell on the north side and one on the south side, maybe that would solve that problem. But that's a times two kind of thing, be that as it may. Is an 8-foot path, would it fit within the right of way?
No,
Okay.
not in most places, no.
Okay, so we're limited to 5 foot, and it's only pedestrian, no bikes. I imagine people, joggers and people with strollers could use it because they're, on their feet. But is a pedestrian-only path officially something we want to do?
I thought that the whole purpose was to get the bicyclists. That's what's in front of my house every day.
But again, can't we adjust our ordinances to allow us to have cyclists to use those paths?
Possibly, I don't know.
We don't know.
I'm gonna
Unless
go
it's
look.
a revised code.
Well, I don't know if, if our home rule powers would allow it, I just don't know.
Okay, so that's a legal
So
question.
we need to find that out.
Because I don't want to see a path built that costs us money, regardless whether it's 200,000 or whatever it might be, and it's not enough. Because I'm pretty sure if you have to widen it down the road, it's going to cost significant amount of money. And to Dennis's point, maybe we're now asking people to give us part of their front yard, and if they're not willing, and I don't want to do this, but eminent domain to take one section, which would seriously delay the whole process, I imagine, if the homeowner decided to take it to a jury trial in Geauga County Court. And he or she could. So 8 foot is not something we can do without significant change for the homeowners along the path. And to Dennis's point, it's different when people say, hey, we'd like, 4 feet of your front yard. We understand you were supportive. Now we want part of your front yard. Maybe they're not quite so supportive as they were before.
Having had a childhood home taken by eminent domain, it's not necessarily a wonderful path you want to go down. Everything but.
I can assure you, Dennis, I've seen those actions, and no, I'm not sure anybody wins out of them, but typically the homeowner comes out smiling broader than the village does, I guess you would say.
Jump in
Something
for a
else.
second,
Sure.
just to kind of expand on that a little bit. I've got a document from the Ohio Department of Transportation. It's a chapter that provides guidelines for the shared paths. And in the section where it references pedestrians, including walkers, runners, people using wheelchairs, both non-motorized and motorized, people with baby strollers, people walking dogs and others, adult upright bicycles, tricycles, bicycles pulling trailers, tandem bicycles, child bicyclists, inline skaters, roller skaters, skateboards, kick scooter users of other micro-mobility devices, paths that have widths less than 11 feet do not provide space for people to travel side by side and be passed by other users approaching from the opposite direction without increasing the potential for conflict. Failure to account for normal human social behavior in the mix of operating speeds will result in user conflicts. I do have a concern about the minimum width of 5 feet, because in this document it states 11 feet would be the minimum. They call a constrained path 8 feet. So at 5 feet, we're super constrained. Although again, I would love the idea of paths for getting the kids off the road and whatnot. But just yesterday, during our bike event, the crosswalk, 90% of the people never push the button. They never turn the lights on. We had 2 people at one point sitting on both sides of the crosswalk, looking at each other as cars are approaching, slowing down, and then taking off. Neither one of the people that were standing at the crosswalk pushed the button. So I know there's some confusion there. Also, to have 3 separate locations where we're going to be crossing Bell Road, that's troubling. That's going to be, I believe, another safety concern. Looking at my notes here, I also have concerns about the grade. There's a 6% grade coming down Bell Road from about 1080 Bell to Waverly Lane. 12-year-old kid on a Huffy bike coming down that hill, I don't think they're going to want to stop for that crossing at Waverly Lane. The better path for them to take would be to get back on the road where they have the right of way and they don't have to stop for that cross street. So I'm worried that they're going to leave that lane, that bike trail, and go back on the road. So I just have a few concerns about it. Although again, the idea of the bike path is phenomenal. I would love to see it. Just have these concerns about these minor issues.
Did want to continue with coming off your comments, Chief. Why not keep the bike path solely on the north side of the road rather than going across to the park, down the park, and then back over? I mean, I understand it's village property, so it can be wide. That's why it's needed, I suppose, considering the conservancy. But if it goes straight down Bell on the north side, let's say, or straight down Bell on the south side, wouldn't that be better for the bicyclists? And some of I know the cemetery is on the south side, and there's houses and Sugar Bush and all that. But did the committee consider a south side path rather than the north side, or a continuous north side path that didn't cut over twice to the park? I mean, we could put the crossing things there so people can cross safely if they push the button or not to the park. But the question to me, did the committee consider those alternatives? Please.
We did consider a continuous north side path.
Okay.
And we held a number of meetings, or 2 meetings for the residents who live along Bell on the north side, where this path would go through their yard. We had 1 meeting for those that were between Alderwood and Gurney, and then ones that were directly across from the park.
Right.
What we heard from the people who live directly across the park is, yes, we want this. Some of them had kids who were on Bell, and they walked their bikes to the side streets to then go for bike rides. So they were excited about this, but they said, we don't understand why we would put it on this side of the street. We have to cross all of these driveways when you have a park that's village property across the street. And so their guidance to us was move the path to that side of the street for that section where you don't have bikes crossing, potentially backing up cars down driveways and things like that. And that is why we asked to actually have that segment on that side.
Okay.
I don't know, I think it's an engineering decision, right, that for not having it continuous along the south side.
Yeah, I think the cemetery is the biggest issue in that area. There's just, you're not gonna get it, path in that area.
Did you have
Too
to
much
carve
slope.
into the hill?
Yeah, I don't think we wanna do
Carve
that.
into the cemetery.
Okay.
Steps, but I did
That
have.
would require one more.
Me too.
Right.
Okay, all right. And I presume the village would have to take care of the asphalt path wherever it's built forever and ever after it's done? Okay. And, let's see, Jerry alluded to, or mentioned stormwater. I'm really concerned about that. The sanitary lines that run down the north side, embedded on the north side of the street, and the stormwater lines that are also there. And anytime we talk about filling in a ditch, I believe it's a basic engineering principle that ditches are better than pipes in terms of conveying stormwater. And we did spend a lot of money fixing stormwater issues, and we're gonna spend a lot more in order to get those issues resolved. I don't want this bike path to first impact negatively all the people to the west, that from the hill down, but I also don't want those storm lines and the sanitary lines disturbed if we don't have to. And if the path fills in this ditch that runs, Lyndall Hughes's property, basically down the hill, I think that's a real serious problem in the sense that we won't be able to do the job without making stormwater worse, or the path deteriorate because the stormwater influx is so high, it overwhelms the pipes. Follow me?
Mhm.
Okay.
Are there flooding issues there now?
Not at the moment, but everybody who lives on the western side of the village will tell you stormwater is a major issue to all of them, especially Fairview, for example, and Hazelwood. But that's a real significant concern for me, because that hill, like the chief says, is 6% grade. By the way, people in wheelchairs at the top of the hill. People in wheelchairs at the bottom of the hill going east. I mean, I'm not advocating a rope tow like Holly Valley or something like that, but
Okay,
these are things, Mayor, I think we should consider.
let's try to wrap it up. First of all, your spandex bikers will never be on this path. They will always stay on the road. We've been here for a little over an hour. I put in front of you a tentative timeline. As I said, my goal tonight, August 25th, is to get a motion to accept what Rich has presented so far. It is presented to us, proposal.
Mayor, I apologize to interrupt, but we cannot make that motion tonight because it was not noticed as such. This was noticed as a work session of the
Okay.
two meetings, of the two committees, so unfortunately you cannot.
Okay, so we can't take a motion, all right. What I propose that we do, Friday morning, the committee meets at 8:30. Saturday, the next few Saturdays, I hopefully will have people at the farmer's market to answer questions. On September the 8th, hopefully, the Emerald Lakes HOA president will come and speak a little bit about her community's feelings about a path. And the preserve of Chagrin would be brought in also on that day. On the 22nd, we would hear from the Chagrin Lakes HOA and from the country estates. Also on September 22nd, council will be doing some budgeting. So on October 13th, hopefully we can get some money budgeted. Now, as I also said, we put in our request in October of 2025. It's called the Request for Programming Local Public Agency, LPA, submitted it to ODOT. First time we could dig a shovelful would be July 1st, 2027. So we've got some planning, plenty of time to plan, plenty of time to get through. But as you've seen in some of our correspondence, no one has said you can't do the 5, and they said, looks like you can do it. But I think we need to push this now to ODOT and get some final engineering and get something done. So Since we can't do anything tonight, I just think we want to keep plugging away at this. Rich, thank you very much. Carrie, again, thank you, but you're a tough person. A good worker. I appreciate everything you've done. And at 8:39, unless somebody else has something to say.
I do. I just
Okay.
want to make sure we're going to get some answers on 5 feet versus 8 feet versus
Yeah.
ADA.
Yeah.
We need to have finality.
I mean, everything we're getting in writing so far is, it looks fine. But everything we propose then goes to ODOT and they say,
Right.
yeah, and we've heard from ODOT that it's fine. But let's go to what is here.
The document that Neil Shop, the comments from Neil Shop, don't tell us that 5 feet is fine.
Okay,
They don't.
okay, this is.
So let us be clear on it.
There's an email from Milwaukee, the planner at Milwaukee, that says 5 feet is an acceptable project.
Yeah.
But it would be a pedestrian.
If it's a pedestrian only. And my assumption was that the committee is not interested in a pedestrian only because it says bike safety in the name of it. I assume that you wanted to be able to ride bikes on it.
I mean, I think the committee is who's proposing a 5-foot cap, right? We are proposing that, because we know that that's what fits within the right of way. It will get, the pedestrian use for sure off, and other people and potentially children who are on bikes, which may be an acceptable use. We'll have to find out the legal use for kids, but
Then let us
as
get
the
the,
mayor was saying, adults on bikes who already feel like Bell Road is a safe place for them to bike, is a different thing, but right now, there's pedestrian use of Bell without any pedestrian facilities. And we wanna create what we can with the funding that we have, that we can which is actually doable.
and I support that with the idea that we get the parameters from a legal perspective of what we can and cannot do. Okay, so that we can actually tell our constituents what we are doing and that it is legal to do it.
We don't want to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
No, we want to find out if we can do the 5 foot, what we can do. Okay, anybody else? Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Moved by Porter, seconded by Berger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?